A single computer chip has just become the center of a geopolitical storm between the world's two superpowers, and what happens next could reshape the entire future of artificial intelligence. DeepSeek, China's AI startup that shocked the world with low-cost AI models, has just received conditional approval to buy Nvidia's H200 chips, but there's a massive catch that nobody saw coming. The conditions aren't finalized, Nvidia hasn't received any orders, and both the United States and China are playing a high-stakes game of chess where every move could trigger consequences that ripple across the global tech industry. This isn't just about a tech company buying hardware, this is about strategic infrastructure, national security, and the battle for AI dominance that will define the 21st century. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what makes the H200 so critical in the first place. The H200 is Nvidia's second most powerful AI chip, sitting just below their newest models, and AI companies around the world are desperate to get their hands on it. These chips are essential for training large language models and running inference at scale, the very backbone of modern artificial intelligence. The technical specifications that matter most are processing performance, memory bandwidth, and high-speed interconnects that allow these chips to work together inside massive data centers. But here's the thing. AI infrastructure has become the oil of the 21st century. The H200 isn't just a product, it's critical infrastructure for cutting-edge AI, including models like those built by DeepSeek, which competes with US firms like OpenAI at far lower cost. Just as nations once fought over oil fields, they now compete for control of chip supply chains. And whoever controls these chips controls the future. DeepSeek's rise has been nothing short of extraordinary. In January 2025, DeepSeek released AI models rivaling OpenAI's GPT at a fraction of the cost, rattling global tech markets and proving that China could compete in AI without the massive budgets that American companies throw at their projects. They demonstrated that efficient AI development is possible without US scale investment, challenging every assumption the West had made about the AI race. And here's the irony that makes this story so compelling. They achieved this success despite existing US chip restrictions, working around limitations that were supposed to slow them down. Now, having proved they can innovate under pressure, they want access to the best chips available, and both governments are scrambling to figure out what that means. The United States has turned export controls into a weapon, and the restrictions they've imposed reveal just how seriously they take this competition. In January 2025, the US formally cleared Nvidia to sell H200s to China, but that clearance came with strict conditions designed to limit what China could actually do with them. There are performance limits on processing power and memory bandwidth, caps on high-speed interconnects that limit cluster performance, and export volumes are capped at less than 50% of US domestic sales. The volume that can actually be shipped is tied to whether export licenses are granted at all, creating multiple choke points in the supply chain. A senior US lawmaker alleged that Nvidia had helped DeepSeek refine AI models that were later used by the Chinese military, according to a letter sent to US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. The fear driving US policy is straightforward. Advanced chips enable China's AI capabilities, reducing America's technological advantage in a domain that has both commercial and military applications. Every chip that crosses the Pacific becomes a dual-use technology that could power either the next breakthrough chatbot or the next generation of autonomous weapons systems. But China isn't just passively accepting whatever the United States decides to allow. Beijing has the final say on whether these chips can actually be imported into the country, and they're using that power to send very deliberate signals. China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology and Ministry of Commerce have granted approvals to DeepSeek, ByteDance, Alibaba, and Tencent, but those approvals come with conditions still being finalized by the National Development and Reform Commission, China's state economic planning agency. Some reports even suggest that customs authorities have been told that graphics processing units are not permitted to enter the country, creating a confusing situation where approval exists on paper but may not translate into actual shipments. China's concerns are mirror images of America's fears. Dependence on U.S. technology creates strategic vulnerability. Domestic chip purchase mandates are being considered to boost local alternatives, and appearing too dependent on American technology undermines the entire narrative of technological self-reliance that Beijing has been building. As of January 30th, 2026, we know that China granted conditional approval for these four major tech companies to collectively purchase more than 400,000 H200 chips. But the conditions remain undefined, with the NDRC still deciding the exact terms that will govern these purchases. We don't know the exact performance limits that will be imposed on the approved chips. We don't know the actual number of chips that can be shipped since that number is tied to U.S. sales volumes. We don't know whether domestic chip purchase mandates will be imposed alongside the imports, and we have no timeline for when any of this will be finalized. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang told reporters in Taipei on Thursday that his company had not received such information, adding that he believed China was still finalizing the license. The company finds itself in an extraordinarily awkward position, caught between huge Chinese market demand that could mean hundreds of thousands of chips sold, U.S. regulatory scrutiny and lawmaker pressure that could intensify at any moment, and unclear Chinese import permissions that leave everything in limbo. DeepSeek has become much more than just another AI company in this saga. It's become a political symbol that both sides are watching obsessively. The company proved that efficient AI development is possible without massive US-scale investment, creating models at a fraction of the cost of OpenAI's offerings and demonstrating that China can innovate around restrictions designed to slow them down. Now they're preparing to launch their next-generation model, V4, in mid-February, featuring enhanced coding capabilities that are expected to rival or surpass Claude and the GPT series in code generation. The new MHC architecture and Ngram conditional memory module are designed to cut training costs while easing GPU memory bottlenecks, potentially overcoming the limitations of domestic AI chips' high-bandwidth memory. The V4 model could accelerate China's local computing ecosystem, and H200 approval might give DeepSeek the edge they need while domestic alternatives continue catching up. But here's the fascinating contradiction at the heart of this story. DeepSeek succeeded brilliantly under restrictions, proving they didn't absolutely need the best American chips. So, why are they seeking them now? If the approval goes through, it validates that Chinese companies can still access cutting-edge hardware despite the tech war rhetoric. If it's denied, it reinforces the narrative of U.S. containment and gives Beijing even more justification to pour resources into domestic chip development. The implications of this approval process extend far beyond DeepSeek's immediate hardware needs. The H200 chips require advanced cooling systems, liquid cooling, not standard air cooling, because they push power densities beyond what typical server racks can handle, ranging from 12 to 150 kilowatts per rack. Chinese data center infrastructure vendors could see massive orders if these chip purchases go through, and the global liquid cooling market is projected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 51.93% from 2024 to 2030, with the US and China at the forefront of adoption. This approval process reveals the fundamental limits of US export controls. China gets some access, but under degraded performance parameters that theoretically limit what they can achieve, while the US maintains a technological edge but risks pushing China faster towards self-sufficiency. The regulatory chess playing out on both sides follows predictable patterns. The US strategy allows controlled exports to keep companies engaged commercially, imposes performance caps to limit military applications, and monitors end use by scrutinizing recipients like DeepSeek. China's counter-strategy accepts limited imports to meet immediate needs, imposes domestic purchase mandates to build local industry, and plays the long game to reduce future dependence on any single supplier or country. Every chip approval has become a geopolitical calculation where no transaction is purely commercial at this level. Technology decoupling accelerates, but incompletely, because both sides still benefit from some level of engagement, even as they prepare for a future where that engagement might end. In the immediate timeline ahead, we're watching for DeepSeek's V4 launch in mid-February to see what performance metrics they achieve. We're waiting for China's NDRC to finalize H200 approval conditions in the coming weeks. And nobody knows whether Nvidia will actually receive orders and ship chips, even if all the approvals line up perfectly. 3 scenarios could play out from here. Approval with heavy restrictions, where DeepSeek gets H200s, but with lower performance caps, limited quantities, strict end-use monitoring, and domestic chip purchase quotas attached. A symbolic win for engagement with limited practical benefit. Alternatively, approval could be quietly withdrawn as China decides the strategic risk is too high and pushes DeepSeek toward domestic alternatives, accelerating tech decoupling and strengthening the U.S. narrative of containment. Or we could see full approval amid U.S. backlash, where China approves, DeepSeek's orders arrive, the U.S. Congress launches investigations, and potential new export restrictions get imposed, escalating the entire tech conflict with Nvidia caught directly in the crossfire. The long-term trajectories are becoming clear even if the immediate outcome remains uncertain. China's domestic chip industry gets a 5 to 10-year runway boost, regardless of what happens with these H200 approvals, because Beijing is now fully committed to achieving semiconductor self-sufficiency. The United States maintains its technological edge, but faces steady erosion as China invests heavily in catching up, and global AI development fragments into separate tech ecosystems that may never fully reconnect. Technology has become indistinguishable from geopolitics, where every advanced chip shipment requires calculations about economic benefit versus strategic risk, short-term profit versus long-term competition, and engagement versus containment. DeepSeek isn't just a company anymore, it's a test case for the entire future of US-China tech relations, and its success at achieving high performance at low-cost challenges fundamental U.S. assumptions about AI development. Whether DeepSeek gets these H200 chips signals the broader direction of tech competition for the rest of the decade. AI leadership equals economic competitiveness, AI infrastructure equals national security capability, and control of AI supply chains equals 21st century strategic power. The H200 chip approval isn't just about one company's hardware needs, it's a microcosm of the defining geopolitical contest of our era, and how it resolves will tell us whether the future of AI develops as one global ecosystem or fractures into 2 competing spheres that view each other with suspicion and fear. What do you think China should ultimately do? Approve the chips and risk continued dependence on American technology? Or block them completely and double down on technological self-reliance even if it means slower progress in the short term? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to stay ahead of the tech geopolitics reshaping our world, hit that subscribe button for weekly deep dives into the stories that actually matter.